Good evening, everybody. I'm always struck by the level of depression that exists in our society. I saw a statistic, I think it was the statistic was actually quite old at the time I saw it, that something like 7 to 8% of all American school children suffer from clinical depression. Clinical depression doesn't just mean having a bad hair day. We're in a world which is beset, and I'm not here tonight to sort of analyze the ills of society and what causes the problems. I want to focus on one aspect that I think is a tremendous contribution to the lack of mental health and its reverse, how it tremendously can help a person. We live in a society where we've been taught that things should be easy. We expect things to be easy. Being easy is a yardstick of value in itself. We want drive-in banks, we want drive-in food, we want drive-in movies, we want drive-in marriage, and probably followed by drive-in divorce. I don't want to get out of my car. Now, one of the things that really teaches a child, a young person, to have self-worth, to value themselves, is to rise to a challenge and to succeed in something which is difficult. Mount Whitney is one of the largest, I think the largest mountain in the whole of the continental US. I don't know how long it would take you to climb it. I'm guessing probably a couple of days. Now, Mount Whitney, probably if you took a helicopter, you could get to the top of it in probably under 10 minutes or 15 minutes, something like that. Now, who feels better when they get to the top of Mount Whitney? The guy who's schlepped up there, who struggled for 2 days to get there, or the one who jumped in a helicopter and just glided into the top? Clearly the person who worked hard. Hard work, effort, success in something which is difficult builds a person's self of their own abilities, their own self-confidence. And so when you build a society which teaches people that hard work is to be avoided at all possible costs, sure, okay, sometimes you have to work hard, but to the extent that you can get it easily, you should go for it, go that route. It's doing a tremendous disservice. Working hard is something, Odom la'omol yulad, it says. A person is born to work hard. The nature of a person is he enjoys hard work. This week I want to talk about laziness and how dangerous and destructive laziness is. We're in the middle of Perek 6, the 6th chapter of Mesilas Yesharim, here in our path of finding our own path to avodas Hashem, to serving God. And we've reached the 6th chapter, which describes a midah, a character trait called zrizus, which is translated as alacrity. One of the things that elevates a person off on the spiritual ladder, if you've been listening, watching these talks, you'll understand, you'll know that we've come through the section which is to do with keeping ourselves distant from aveiros, from sins. We've now moved on to the idea of bringing ourselves close to Hashem through doing the positive mitzvahs, the mitzvahs aseh. And in order to do the mitzvahs, as we discussed last week, a person has to overcome his natural, physical bent to laziness. Odom min ha'ofer. Man comes from the ground, from the earth. The earth sinks downward. The nature of a person is his natural, his default position is to be lazy. It's something, the most natural thing in the world. And because it's so natural, literally of his nature, the nature of man, so it requires a constant battle to overcome a person's natural laziness. And step one of that is to realize that nobody, or very few people, of course, different People have different natures and different quantities and of different character traits and distributed amongst their personalities in different ways and different strengths, but it's a very rare person who is a natural Zoriz. Most of us really need to work hard, very hard, at overcoming the natural tendency that we have to laziness. But without doing this, a person cannot do anything in life, and certainly not in his service of Hashem. I was struck by the fact that if you look at the word in Hebrew for laziness, atzlut, it's almost exactly the same as another word in Hebrew, atzvut, which means sadness. The two are very closely connected together. When you see somebody who is sad, they move in a very slow, sluggish way. And as we talked about last week, one of the things that Hashem has given us a handle on our midos, because a person is able to tap into those character traits that he has through the physical world. Let me explain what I mean. I think I explained last week that a Talmud of mine once came to me and asked me that he had tremendous trouble getting to davening on time. Sound familiar? So I asked my Rebbe a solution. So he told me to tell him that he should run to everything. Run to everything. Run to lunch. Run to get a cup of coffee. Run to all the pleasant things in life as well as those things which you don't want to do. Because when a person inculcates in himself through using his physical body, we have control over the physical body. And the physical body will certainly want to do things which is pleasurable. But that midah of zrizut, of alacrity, can be inculcated into a person's personality if he uses that midah even in things which he enjoys. Because, as I said, this constant repetition, there's no way that a person can ever do anything with his personality unless he does it on a constant basis. Nothing can be done one-off. Every good thing in the world can only come through habituation. And just like habituation can be one of the worst things in the world when a person becomes habituated to negative things, but it's a midah. The midah of habituation is also a character trait. So a person can teach himself to habituate himself to a certain way of behavior by using the things that he likes to do. It's a perfectly valid and, I would think, essential. Milo lishma bo lishma, as Chazal teaches, from the non-altruistic reasons for doing things, the selfish reasons, a person comes to altruism. And Chazal say, la'olam, the Bali Musa say that's the only way, the only person a person can reach altruism is by starting off with selfish, non-altruistic reasons, with the understanding, of course, that he is using this to get to the altruism. But also along with that is the fact of the matter is that there's something called habit. We have good habits and bad habits. Nobody thinks in the morning of getting up and brushing their teeth. Brushing your teeth is a very good idea because it means that you have fewer visits to the dentist. But nobody thinks in the morning, makes a decision, shall I brush my teeth, shall I not brush? Nobody goes through that thought process. Habituation is a wonderful thing because it allows us to take vast areas of our lives and consign them to the automatic pilot, and we can get on with the business of things that require our focus, our concentration, and our decision. We have to habituate ourselves. We can habituate ourselves to the midah of alacrity. And as I said before, the word atzlus, laziness, is exactly, atzlus is spelled ayin, tzadi, lamed, Vov, Taf, Atzlut, is almost exactly the same as the word Atzvut, meaning sadness. Ayin, Tzadi, Beis, Vov, Taf, Atzvut, sadness. And I was thinking as I was preparing the shir before that if you take the two letters which differentiate these two words, you come out with the word Lev. The way to affect the heart is through the actions. If a person is lazy, it will teach his heart to be sad. We spoke last week about this whole principle of Achrei Pe'ulos Nimshichem Levavos. I'm not going to go over it again. Ayin Sham. Let's carry on. We're right in the middle. The last thing we did was that Mesilas said, Ki chizuk gadol tzorech lemisha rotze lepois hateva el hefcho. That a person needs a tremendous amount of strength in order to overturn his natural inclination and use that to be a zoriz, to be somebody who's alacritus. Now we're going to move on to some quotes from scripture, from Tanakh. V'hinei Shlomo Melech Shona Ma'oid v'azharoso al zeh. Shlomo Melech repeated many times his warning about somebody who has the characteristic of laziness. But also has Nira Hatzola, when he saw the evil that of laziness. I have said Agadol Hanimshech Bimenu, and the tremendous loss that results from it. Shlomo says in Mishlei, Ma'at Sheinois, a little bit of sleep, Ma'at Pnumois, a little bit of slumber, Ma'at Chibuk Yodayim, a little bit of folding the arms, folding the hands. Lishkov, to lie down, have a little rest. Uva Kimahalech Reishecho, and your poverty, Lashon of Rash, your poverty will come upon you like a walking man, like somebody who just walks in the front door, he'll be there. Umachsorocha ki'ish mogain, and your loss like an armed man. He'll be there, he'll dominate you, like somebody who's armed. Kinei or etzel, because a lazy person, afal pisha eino oise rak b'kum va'aseh, even though he doesn't do evil by positive, proactive, negative actions. He doesn't go out and do bad things. Hine humevi es ara olav, he brings evil upon himself b'shei v'al taseh, through his sitting and not doing, through inaction. V'amar, and also in Mishlei it says, Yud Ches Tes, Gam misrape b'malachto achu lebal mashchis. This idea. Also, the one who is weak in doing the malacha, doing his serving Hashem. And of course, we can translate this into any aspect of life. But principally, I think he's talking about Melechus Hashem. Ach hu lebal mashchis. He is the brother to the destroyer. Ki af al pi she'eno mashchis ha'oiseh es hara biyodov. Because even though this person is not a physical, as we said before, a proactive destroyer with his hands, lo tachshov shehu rachok mimenu. Do not think that he is far from that. Ela ochivhu uben gilahu. Rather, he's his brother and his doppelganger. V'amod lever ra'as ha'etzel be'eo tziori. Shlomo Melech also gives us a vivid depiction, a mashal, a parable of how destructive laziness is. Ma'yikra, what can happen, v'yivaleid, and what can be engendered. Le'inenu yom yom, as we see every day, what happens when a person's lazy, as Shlomo Melech says, Chaf Daled in Mishlei, I passed by the field of a lazy person, and by a vineyard of somebody who failed to pay attention. Behold, it was overgrown with thorns, kosuponov charulim, and it was covered with thistles, etc. And I saw Oshis libi Ra'isi, and I paid attention to this. Lokachti Musa, I took a moral lesson away from this observation. I looked at this field, I thought this field, I'm putting this in now, he doesn't say this here. I looked at this field, so to speak, Shlomo is saying, and clearly the field didn't start off like this. Maybe this fellow inherited this beautiful field. But ma'at shenos, a little bit of slumber, ma'at tumos, a little bit of sleep and slumber, and all of a sudden, there you go, your poverty is upon you, like a man who just walks in the front door, like an armed soldier who comes to take away your property. Uva mishalech reishecha, and your poverty walks in, like we said, like a man walking in the front door. Hine milvad pshuta. Apart from the obvious literal lesson that one can derive from this, talking about literal fields and literal thorns, ashehu amiti kamash ma'oy, as it's true as the implication is. We all know this. Shehu mashekare, which is that's what happens. El sadeo etzel mamash, to a person who is lazy with his property, with his business. Hinei darashu bo chachamim zichron levracha. Chazal darshan from this. They extrapolate in the Yalkut a medrash no'er, a very beautiful idea in the midrash. This is how Chazal used this story of Shlomo HaMelech and teach us a lesson about spiritual things as well as physical things. It was all overgrown with thorns, if you remember the field. This could be understood as somebody who sits down to learn Torah and he doesn't find an explanation. He's sitting and he's learning and he has a question about what he's learning. And he doesn't go to the end, he doesn't put effort into it to expend his energy, to understand the depth and the truth of what he's learning. And therefore, kosu ponov, the whole face of this field, meaning his Torah learning, becomes covered with thistles and thorns. Mitel shelo omal behem hu yoshev umatame esataho umatah esatome. Because he didn't labor sufficiently to really try and understand, so he settles with some superficial understanding. And as a result of that, he makes impure, but tame, that which is actually pure. He takes away his learning. He misunderstood his learning. He goes away and he makes impure that which is pure, and he makes pure that which is impure. Uparitz gederoi dieron shel tamid chachamim, and he breaks through the barrier of tamid chachamim. In other words, the correct understanding of how the Torah Sheba'al Peh. Uma onsho shel zeh, and what is the punishment for something like this? Shlomo Perish, he says in Koheles, Uparitz geda yishchenu nochash. Somebody who breaks through a barrier will be bitten by a snake. This is a misa bidei shemayim, a death which comes from heaven, he says in the notes here. And because we're talking about a loshon of pritza, pritza's geda, the breaking through of the barriers of the halacha, so that's why the mashal is carried on to the breaking through of the barrier when a person's in a house, let's say a deserted house, and he breaks through a wall. Then Rashi says this, that's when he's liable to be bitten by the snakes that hide in dark, sealed places. V'hainu ki ras ha'etz aleino bo b'vasachos. The explanation here is that the evil doesn't come all at once. A lazy person's evil does not come instantly. It's incremental. It creeps up on him. Ela ma'at ma'at ba, b'li sheyeda v'yargish ba. And that's what's so dangerous, because without him realizing it. It's so insidious. It's slow. From one moment to the next, you don't notice it. But turn around over your shoulder, and the field is full of thorns, is overgrown, nothing grows there. It's been swamped, it's been strangled by the evil of inactivity, of laziness. Ki hinei hu nimshach meira el ra, because this person, this otzel, this lazy person, and we're talking now about a person's spirituality here. Ad sheyemotze tavua b'tachlis hara, until he finds himself wallowing in the nth degree of evil, meaning he's got to a place now where, like quicksand, he can't get himself out anymore. Hinei batchile eina ela machser hatoirach. All that happened was that in the beginning he just lacked a little bit of effort, and which was, appropriate for him to do. His understanding that really a person, okay, I'll leave that. And as a result of that, he didn't learn the Torah with as much as he should have done, both, I would suggest, in its breadth and its depth, in Bekius and in Iyun. And because of this lack of learning, now the next time he comes back to learn, he will lack understanding. And because he's now building, so to speak, on something which was not true to begin with, if that would have been the end of the matter, that would have been bad enough. But now it gets worse and worse. It's like a skyscraper that you try and build. At the beginning, maybe you made just a small error of a couple of inches, a few centimeters. But now, when you try and build on that, because the nature of a person is that he doesn't like to be left with contradictions. So he sees that he's learning something and it doesn't make sense to him. So rather than just leaving it there, and that lack of making sense is a result of his lack of not lack of aptitude, but lack of hatmada, lack of application to try and get to the answer. But so now he's come to this kind of approximated understanding, which is in itself not correct. So, but because the nature of a person is that he wants to make ends meet, so to speak, make it make sense to him. So, he will reveal literally faces of the Torah which are not in accordance with the halacha. Yashchis ha'emes, he will destroy the truth. V'yafcheu, and he will turn it on its head. V'yavor al ha'tekonos, and he will find himself breaching the tekonot, the institutions. There's a better word for it, the measures that Chazal put in place to protect us from being over on any halacha d'oraisa, the gedarim, those fences which are put there to keep us distant from an issa d'oraisa. V'yifros etz hagedarim, he'll break through the barriers. I once heard a very nice moshel actually from Rabbi Zev Leff. People often complain about the sometimes seemingly distant problems which the rabbinic laws of Shabbos seem to distance us from. For example, one of the reasons you're not allowed to ride a horse on Shabbos is maybe that you will come to ride the horse and you'll want a whip or a stick to goad the horse along, and you'll come to a tree and you'll tear off a branch from the tree, and that'll be an issa d'oraisa. Now, to our minds, that seems rather distant, such a possibility. But the distance of the possibility has to be weighed against the severity of the possible, however distant that may be, outcome. he gave a mashal, a beautiful idea. There was a town, a village that existed on the top of a plateau, a very, 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 very high plateau. On every side of this plateau, there was a sheer drop of a couple of thousand meters. So one bright spark decided that it would be a very good idea if they built a fence around the village to stop people falling off the... So somebody said, yes, well, let's not build the fence right on the edge of the cliff. Let's build it 30, 40, 50, 100 yards in from the cliff. So God forbid if somebody breaks through the fence, at least he's got a long way to go before he falls off the cliff. When people complain that rabbinic legislation when it comes to Shabbos seems to be very restrictive, it's because they don't understand the severity of the Issa D'Oraisa. Nobody in that town would be disappointed that they brought in the fence 100 yards, because everybody understood the severity of what happens if that fence gets broken, and the fence would be on the very edge of the cliff. The idea is that when a person is lazy, he fails to do, as he said, the enough work, and in the end of the day, because he wants to make things sit right in his mind, he'll come to reveal faces of halacha, faces of the Torah which are not true, which are not halacha. May sound very nice, may sound very inspiring, but they're wrong. And Torah is about truth. Torah is very beautiful, but nothing is beautiful if it's not true. The old Greek phrase, truth is beauty and beauty is truth, as who was it? John Keats said in Ode to a Grecian Urn. I think it was Keats or Coleridge. It's been a while since I was at school. Truth is beauty and beauty is truth. That's all you know and all you need to know. We don't agree with that. We say that beauty, truth is beauty. What is true is necessarily beautiful. But something to be beautiful by itself means nothing if it's not true. Beauty does not necessarily mean that it's true. The other way around is truth is beauty, but beauty may not necessarily be true. And as we see in the world we live, the world that was bequeathed to us by the Greeks, of all the beautiful things in this world which are far from being true. I mean, you could argue that true beauty really is not beautiful unless it embodies the truth, but we're getting off the topic here. Okay, so let's go on and finish this paragraph off. I think we'll probably halt there today. So as we said, the evil gets worse in as much as he wants to come up with a good conclusion that satisfies himself. He's Megale Torah Shelo Galiponim Kahalacha, and destroys the truth. He turns it on its head, and he gets to break through the barriers which Chazal have placed for us. V'yifrotz esegedarim. V'sofo kloya kamishpat kol poretz geder. And in the end, he will end up destroyed, like all those who break through barriers. As we said before, he will be bitten, figuratively speaking by a snake. Omer Shlomo. Shlomo says, if you remember in the story, at the end of the story, Shlomo said, I looked at this field and I took away a lesson. His bonanti ala dava hazeh. I reflected on this thing. Varisi godel ara, and I saw the greatness of the evil shaboy that was in it. Shehu ke'eres, that it's like a poison. Aholech is mispashet ba'at ma'at, as we said before. It's like a poison that spreads out, that diffuses itself slowly. Ve'ein puloso nikeres. Its effect is not apparent adamisa until a person chalila dies. V'zeh, and that's what it means. Ma'at sheinos Mat Trumos, a little bit of sleep, a little bit of slumber. Mat Chibuk Yodayim, a little bit of folding of the hands. Lishkov, to lie down, take it easy. Ugva Kimahalech Reshecho, and your poverty will arrive at your doorstep like a walking man, and like your loss will be like an armed man. Maybe we just go a little bit forward, because there's a point here that I want to bring in. V'hinei, next paragraph. Anachnu ro'im be'inenu. Kama v'kama pamim shekava libo shel odem yodea chorvoso v'nis'ames etzlo ma sheroi lo lahatzolas nafsho. We see many times that many situations where, for a certain person, let's say, the heart of a person already knows what his obligations are. He's quoting now, if you notice, Chovosoi, his obligations are in the world. When it's emes etzlo, and he's taken that intellectual appreciation and concretized it into emes, it's true for him. He lives within that emotional reality. And he understands Masha Ruilo, what is fitting for him, Latzalas Nafsho, to save his soul. He's got all this down straight. He understands it. He's read Mesilas Yesharim many times, but he didn't get past the first two sections. He knows all about Zehirus, being careful. Umasha Choyva Olov, Mitzad Boro, and what his obligations are in terms of Hashem. Va'afal Pikein, nevertheless, Yanicheu, he leaves it to one side. Lo mecheson hakaras atova hahi, not because of a lack of the recognition hachova hahi, of this obligation that he has with regard to the Torah. V'lo mishum tam acher, and for no other reason, ela mipnei she kvedus ha'atzala hamiskabaris olov, the weight of his laziness weighs him down. Varehu omer, he says, ochel kima, I'll eat a little bit. Or ishon kima, I'll have a little shluf. Or kosher alay, taste basi. It's difficult for me to go out right now. Pashati es kutonti. I took my shirt off, I took my clothes off. I'm ready for bed. How can I get dressed now? Right? He comes home, he forgets to daven Ma'ariv. And so what's he going to do? No. Person has to be Zoriz, has to goad himself against his natural laziness. How can I not get myself dressed now? Or he says, it's hot outside. Or it's too cold outside, or it's raining. And all v'chol sha'a ma'as excuses, v'atoinos and reasons, terutzim asher pi ha'atzelim mole behem, that the mouth of the lazy person is full of them. It's got all the answers in the world. Ubein kach ubein kach, and in the meantime, haTorah munachas, the Torah is left, v'avoda mufuteles, and the service of Hashem is cancelled, v'adam oizev es boiroi, and eventually, this is very shocking, the person can get to the point of leaving off being religious. He can become an atheist. All because of laziness. So, B'ezrat Hashem, in this following week, let's all try and maybe take one aspect of our lives. I don't know what it might be. Getting up in the morning, it's a difficult one. Maybe just one day a week to spring out of bed the way we're supposed to. And B'ezrat Hashem, we'll meet again next week for the last meeting, I think, of the Zman. Kol Tov.